Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. I am your host, Blaine Bartlett. And folks, I want to kind of frame a little bit here the conversation that you are about to be party to. The guest that I have today is Amanda Holmes. Now, you may or may not know Amanda, but I got a hunch that if you go back into the memory archives, you're going to be familiar with another name, Chet Holmes. Chet was probably one of the most prolific and successful teachers of sales on the planet during his tenure. He passed roughly about 10 years ago. And Amanda stepped in and has taken over, and she was 24 years old when she did this. She stepped in and has taken over what was her father's organization, and she's actually grown it significantly, which is a testament to what she has learned at her father's footsteps, but more importantly, what she's been able to integrate and develop on her own, because she's doing some very interesting things. And prior to us going live here, she and I were just having a little bit of a conversation about the nature of the soul of business, and perhaps even the nature of the soul of selling, the soul of sales. So I think you're going to be interested in this whole conversation because it truly does strike to the absolute core of what does it mean to live and express from the soul of your business. So Amanda, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, it's absolutely a treat for me to be hosting you today. Just real quickly here, I'm going to just start with a classic question. Those listeners have heard me ask this before. When you hear the phrase "the soul of business," which for many people is almost an oxymoron, kind of like compassionate capitalism is an oxymoron. But the soul of business, what does that bring up for you?
Oh, it sounds like right in alignment with the journey that I've been on. When my father passed, there was no succession plan for me to step in. And one day I'm a singer-songwriter, the next day I have hundreds of staff, all double, if not triple my age. And I'd never known what the businesses were or how they ran. And it truly, I study under an Indian saint. Her name is Sarvalokama, Her Holiness Shri 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 1008 Guruji Punamji. But for short,
That's
Guruji.
a mouthful.
Yes, it means divine mother to all. It's a very high honor, her name. And over the last decade, I've studied this journey of understanding soul, or connecting to your higher self, or really breaking through the limiting beliefs that we have amidst ourselves or in society that stop us from achieving our true potential. So when I had no other roadmap but to just guess, it was actually my guru that just kept saying, connect to your soul, right? To ask for the questions within, grab as much information as you can, but that discernment comes from within you. So really my connection to my soul is the only reason why the company is here today. And I have to thank my guru for the mental pieces of that to help get me into alignment. And then I also thank my father, who had the business acumen to say, these are the steps you need to take to work smarter. So between the two, I think I am a living embodiment of soul and sales, because I wouldn't be able to do it any other way.
I love that story. I absolutely love that story. The resonance of becoming quiet, that I can literally hear the voice of wisdom, because that voice has never failed me. The only time it's failed me is when there's too much noise in my head and I'm not finding a way to turn it off. And being able to bring that up to the forefront so that it can actually be leveraged and actioned. In the context of a business, now your dad had the business acumen to set things up, and you have the wisdom to associate yourself in a way that you learned how to bring that voice into light. How did you manage the transition between that personal evolution of listening to the voice to have, like you said, a staff that was 2 to 3 times older than you, that had long tenure, that were used to doing things in a very specific kind of certain way, that would be kind of habitual processes were in place? How did you bring it to the point? Because I know that you did this. How did you bring it to the point where you were able to tap into the soul of that business? so that it could have a reincarnation, literally.
Yeah. I love your word choices here. It's so much fun. It's not your typical podcast, so I appreciate that. Yeah, so the first 2 years, I looked to hire different C-suites. I hired 3 different CEOs, CMO, a CTO, just trying to fill the void of my father being gone. And me and my father were very close. I was born on his birthday, actually. So we share
Really?
February 13th. It was as if it was cosmic or kismet that, we would just be so unbelievably close. So losing him just felt like, the wind within my lungs had just evaporated, and I couldn't. I actually had, I would have perpetual panic attacks. Like nobody talks about this. Like it was as if I could never catch my breath because it was perpetually firing off these like feelings of anxiety. And even my father battled in the hospital for 1.5 years before he passed with cancer, and that was so many different experiences to watch somebody that you love realize their own mortality. So I had nightmares for several years of his face in the hospital, and just, it was not an easy route. I used to try and stop myself from seeing the nightmares. I would get in my car and I'd drive around LA, and you might know the PCH. You know the PCH?
Oh, I know the PCH very, very well.
Okay, so that was my favorite place to drive. So I drive up and down the PCH, and I pull off to the side of the road, and I could sleep as long about 1.5 hours until my legs would start to tingle because my feet would fall asleep because the way that the chair was in my car. So I would be woken up by the needles of my feet falling asleep. But that would give me 1.5 hours sleep, but not enough sleep to have the nightmares. I mean, it was rough. And my guru kept telling me, you can step in as CEO, you can do this. And I look at her like, absolutely not. One, how could I even fathom that? I was a singer, right? 2, why would I ever want to? My father buried himself in early grave. He died at 55.
Yeah.
Why? Taking on that role is as if I'm just sitting in the grave right next to him, right? And I know that I'm very much my father's daughter. So, and she just kept telling me that you could do it a different way. There's a different approach that you can take. And so then I stepped in. It's been 8 years now I've been CEO. So in the first year, we increased our marketing reach by 1,176% and doubled coaching clients multiple years. And we've grown double digits over this time. So it's been an amazing run. Absolutely. And with the new edition of my father's book coming out, which I've spent the last 4 years working on, it's a piece of my soul. It's a piece of my heart.
Well, let's talk about that. Well, there's 2 things. I mean, there's more than 2 things. About 17 things pop into my head as we're talking here. But I do want to touch on the book, this revised and updated version that's coming out. But the idea of that journey for you, being able to utilize that, I mean, the dark night of the soul, sort of a thing. It's actually the dark night of the ego. I truly believe it's more about the dark, the soul being able to be welcomed into light. It's not the dark night of the soul. It's the dark night of the ego. Put the ego to sleep and let the soul speak. And you've got an opportunity to do some very interesting things at that point in time. And I love the way that you described this about just, driving up and down PCH, not to run away from anything, but just to kind of be with it in a way that worked for you. Now, that's my assessment of what it was that I heard you saying. And when my wife died 12 years ago of cancer, I was working with Michael Singer, some of the work that Michael Singer had done, the untethered soul and that whole conversation. And the idea of not running away, but actually turning into, facing, blending with it, letting it just kind of be with me for a while. It allowed me to hear the voice, but it also allowed me to handle the grieving, the natural piece of grieving that kind of came with that sense of loss. And what was interesting for you, that loss of identity. Now there's a new identity being born. So there is a question embedded here. Okay. The identity of the company, I have to guess, has transformed in some way, shape, or form, particularly, when you stepped in fully as CEO 8 years ago. Would
Yeah,
that be a fair assessment? And if it is a fair assessment, what would you say it's transformed into? And this leads us to the book. By the way, there is a trajectory here.
no, I'm enjoying the process, the journey. I When I first stepped in, it was really, I'm honoring my father's legacy, but I have to acknowledge that if I'm going to step in, it needs to be my company. How would I run the company? What would make sense for the way that I live my life? And so I am a millennial, whereas my father was a baby boomer. So I gravitated more towards automations and online digital marketing techniques. And so I took a call center. Instead of having a call center, I now ran one-to-many webinars and would have like 500 CEOs on a call. And here I am, 26, all pepper, this is how you double your sales. I still can't believe that I did that. I look back and go, oh my God, what was I thinking? But my father had the script. It was all there. It just needed the strategies are timeless. It's just the tactics that changed. So how we delivered that message used to be in a one-to-one conversation or in a group of 12. And then I made it to many people. And now we have automated videos that take them through the series. So I had to acknowledge that for me to step in, it needed to become my own. And I honor my father and the things that he did great. And then I also recognize that I am a different human being. And for me to take full ownership of it, I needed to adopt and adapt what I would want to see in an organization. So first, I rebuilt the marketing and sales channel because we were mostly run by radio ads. Everything in the organization was run by radio ads and live events. And not having my father speaking on stage, I mean, we had other people that spoke, but not as much as my father did. And radio was dying on the vine at that point. Yeah. And we really had to innovate. And we didn't really have an answer. Nobody had an answer for how to innovate because my father was the innovator in the company. So I came in and said, okay, well, I understand my father's concepts. I understood them from just being in proximity to him my whole life, right? Like hearing how he talked to people. He would give advice to the teller at the CVS about how to assist them with their sales. Or, if we were eating at a restaurant, he'd tell them how to. So I didn't know any other kind of business but what he lived and breathed. So to me, it made sense that this is how you would do it. And since I grew up in a different generation, there were different ways of deploying what he did for faxing and direct mail and cold calling. I did in Instagram DMs and, Periscope live videos and, Facebook lives and all this. So it's still similar. It's just tactical differences. But I would have to say, I'm sorry, I've gone around the bout to answer your question, but it's only until recently, I'd say in the last 2 years, really, that it has bloomed into a business where I'd say it's more of a demonstration of my soul than even my father's. And now there's still the concepts that he taught. It's just, this ties into the book as well. It's where it's the come from, it's the intention behind it. And I've really rebuilt a lot of our products and services and trainings and boot camps, and now the book, all to reflect my belief system around business, which is based on my father's methodologies, just for a different generation, I guess.
That's, that again, that journey. The way I, work with clients that I engage with, the way that we've ended up defining sustainable success, which is oftentimes the holy grail. It's kind of like, how do I sustain success? It's not about getting a magic cookie cutter out and just kind of making it happen. There's no secret sauce, but what there is, and this is what you just described perfectly, developing the capacity to continuously start over. If I've got that developed as part of the cultural body of the organization, it gives people permission to invent, to create, to explore, to experiment. And I got a hunch that a lot of that was going on in the last 8 years, a lot of experimentation. Let's try this, let's do that. And and what kept it anchored? What would you say kept that process anchored so that people were willing to continue to play?
I mean, I'm big on it. So I have a whole market data firm within my organization, but I'm big on data. So for instance, I built, once I finished the book, then I went and created boot camps, because 94% of people that purchase a course online never finish it. 94%.
Yep. And
4% finish it. And
that
that's
is
not
not
even
an
counting
uncommon statistic.
results.
Yeah.
That's not even counting results. They're just tracking if you freaking finish the thing, let alone knowing the results. So I said, okay, I'm going to rebuild what my father created 30 years ago, but what it looks like for somebody that has the internet, right? I mean, when my father first originated everything, it was when websites was 2 words. Websites has become 1 word now. Okay. But it's crazy. So I recently built these boot camps, and in the last year we've run pilots of them, and it's been a great success. So 32% of the businesses that went through in the first 30 days generated leads. 32% generated sales, 40% generated leads. And these are people that a lot of the time are B2B selling. So their sales cycle is much longer than 30 days, right? But I'm tracking results. I'm not tracking completion rate. So we're at 10x what the normal industry is, just right. And it's building upon everything that we have online in the marketplace today. So it's one thing for me to say to all my coaches, okay, I've built new training programs, I've recorded them into an LMS, you can go watch it, or come in live with me in a boot camp. I'm going to do a pilot with, another 30 to 50 businesses from around the world. Let's see what results they get. And we're seeing real time. One of the clients that went through that generated $8.4 million 2 weeks after the boot camp. It was absurd. Talk about proof of concept. So I'm very big about data. I'm very big about, I mean, that's one thing that's different between, I used to be a singer. I would sing, and some people like it and some people don't, but there's no real ever measure of success other than maybe, albums sold, which today everyone just streams them. So I guess it's how many views you get on a video. But in sales, I can track, okay, I generated this many leads. It's this percent increase since the last 30 days to 6 months, year over year, right? This is how many sales. So there's a quantifiable, concrete, yes, you have succeeded because of these numbers. So that's one thing that I appreciate from being an artist to now business.
That whole idea of being an artist, that's essentially what you're doing as a business leader. Business is not just a science. There's a science to it, but there's the art that actually gets to the point where you leverage the soul of the business. That's, the idea of beauty. Beauty is the apprehension of the soul of the object. When you can see the soul of the object, that's art, that's beauty, it's there. So we're going to take a real quick break right now. When we come back, I want to go back into we haven't actually gotten into it yet, but the revised and updated version of your book. And I want you to think about, the idea that you said you used to be a singer. I think you used to sing. You're still a singer. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to be able to say, would you sing something for us?
So
we're going to we will take a real quick break. And when we come back in, we're speaking right now with Amanda Holmes, or I'm speaking with Amanda Holmes. You're listening to her. And when we come back, we're going to continue this conversation. So folks, stay tuned. I want to thank you for listening. I want to also invite you right now to go to blainebartlett.com. And on that site, which is my personal website, you'll see services up on the top menu. I'd like you to click on Leadership Mastermind. Now, why I want you to do that is we have structured a mastermind program that is very unusual and it is very powerful. And by going onto that site and clicking that link, you'll be taken to a landing page that is an invitation to join this mastermind. It's a 52-week-long exploration of what it takes to be a highly effective leader in today's fast-changing environment. You won't regret it. And if you've been liking what you've been listening to on these Soul of Business podcasts, how does one become a leader that can keep connection to the soul of business. That's what we look at. That's what we're about in this mastermind program. So again, go to blainebartlett.com and click on the services link. And there you'll find the link to the Leadership Mastermind program. Look forward to seeing you there. Thanks for listening to this little commercial. And now back to our show. Welcome back. You're listening to The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. I am, like I said, your host, Blaine Bartlett. Speaking today on this episode with Amanda Holmes. And Amanda, your dad ran this business for 30 some plus years. You took it over 10 years ago. 8 years you've been making your mark on it. And part of that, like you said, the last 4 years, you've been working on revising and updating his classic book, The Ultimate Sales Machine. And you've put your own twist on this. And prior to us coming on live, you had said something that I was fascinated by. You came across something about how to live a rich and full life, which you said was the encore that your dad never got to give. And you've incorporated that into the book. So I'm just going to start with that as kind of a preamble to how is this revised and updated version actually not only your dad's book, but now your book as well?
So I'll backtrack it for a moment. So one of the reasons why I started and did this work is because when my father was battling, there was this moment where I'll never forget it. So he went through the bone marrow transplant and he was quarantined for 2 months in a very small room on the cancer floor at Cedars-Sinai. And I walked in the door because he never spent a night alone. He spent 352 nights there. And every night was either me, my mom, or my brother. We would do these all-nighters with him. And I walk in for my shift and see my father there. And he looks was looking out into the distance. And I just asked him, what's going on? And he says, for all the wealth that I've amassed, nothing can buy my way out of this hospital room. And that moment just changed me forever. And I spent the rest of the 10 years since then really digging deep into what's the purpose for us being here and why am I here? Why are we on this earth? And I was lucky enough to have a wonderful teacher that has guided me through this process. But after all of these things that I learned from her and, being able to save the business and carrying it on there, I wanted to share those lessons that I had learned really about the soul and of our soul and that connection. And I knew that the new Penguin kept asking me for a new edition of the book. And I kept saying no for years and years and years. Like, how could I ever touch that? I mean, our clients call it the Red Bible because second to the Bible, they read this the most. I mean, it's like they love it. And when I asked them, when I finally said, yes, I'll update the book, I said, what do you want to see changed? And they said, nothing. It's perfect. So you can imagine. And it had been written 15 years prior. Like, come on, we know there's some things that need updating. But that was really my why behind it, is this wanting to bridge the gap between what business is and what we should really be thinking about, which is fulfillment and abundance and what success really means. So right before the manuscript was due, I was juggling through my father's old emails, and that's how I figured out about my father's business. It was the only way, because I never got to ask him questions about the business. So I would go into his emails and read his old emails. And I found this email that he wrote to a dear friend where he said that he generated more wealth in 6 months than he had in the previous 8 years combined. So when I found that, I went, that's got to be in the book. And then it took me another 2 years after that to write the final chapter. And I've written over 100 versions of that final chapter, How to Live a Rich and Full Life. And so that's going into the book, like you said, the encore that he never got to give.
That is, I've got chills just listening to that story. Okay, where do I want to go with this? There's a thing that you're doing that I think is fascinating, and it's, again, I keep referencing the conversation that we had prior to going live. I should probably just bring that conversation into the podcast.
It's okay.
I'll just start at the beginning.
Like.
Yeah, we'll just kind of do, here's the outtake. But the idea that the purpose of business is to enhance the experience of being alive on the planet. And if you're doing that well, you got a pretty good shot at being successful. The idea that if I do that well, it's a healthy way to run business. And I cannot tell you the number of clients I've had in the last 40 years that have PTSD as a consequence of being in the C-suite. Or just being in the organization, whatever the
Absolutely.
organization is. My take on what you're doing right now is you're approaching this with a perspective of how can I do this with health and well-being in mind, not just the metrics of traditional success.
Absolutely.
How is that actually showing up in the way that you're running the business with the culture? Because I imagine there's a bit of a shift there. So what are you seeing, and how are your people, quote unquote, your people responding to this?
That's been the last 2 years and I've had a really wonderful business coach too. His name is Jerry McNamara, that's helped guide me because I inherited a company of cowboys.
Yeah.
And when the sheriff left, the cowboys attacked. It was the Wild West. I mean, it didn't matter. You get shot dead, and it didn't matter how long you'd known them, how many Christmases they'd been at your family. It was war. And so I know what it's like to have a very toxic work environment. For me, it was toxic. I don't know if it was always that way, but people got brutal after my father left, and I really had to protect me and my mother a lot. And I actually took 2 years where I just said, after everything kind of balanced out and it seemed the business was okay going through the tumultuous times, I just said, I need a reset. I don't believe in people anymore. I've lost faith in humanity because of how brutal it was. And for 2 years, I talked to more plants than I did people. I spent my time in a community garden in Florida in a healing center. My guru's ashram, it's called Divine Bliss International. And I just healed from the inside. She says that the fastest way to heal your mind and body is to get connected to Mother Nature and Earth and nature. So that's what I did. I didn't eat anything from outside. I only ate what I grew in the garden for months and just healed. And then when I kind of emerged again, I thought, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this right. I want it to live within my core values. And my coach had walked me through this process of coming up with picking a word and then building out your core value from it. And after I finished the exercise, I said, Jerry, I don't think that this made sense, this exercise, because you would look at this and go, there's no way that that's a sales and marketing training company because my core values are like beauty, to see beauty everywhere we go, or create more beauty from where it was left, grace, to follow my true self to places that hustling never could. Like these lead by example, to create a song that inspires others to join in to create that symphony. And it's been an interesting way to discern who would be in my organization, because we're growing rather rapidly. We're up about 379% in revenue from last year. And when everyone else is having a hard time, 80% of businesses had less revenue last year than they did the year prior. And that's post-COVID, right? We're supposedly post-COVID, and yet people are just,
we're back to normal.
The disruption it caused was insane, but we've been seeing growth. And so I've been having to hire a lot more people into my organization. And it's so very clear. I'm now hiring based on core values. First, if they don't follow my core values, I've shared with them because I have it all planned out for the next decade and beyond where we're going. And, I haven't revealed it to the masses yet, but this book is only just the start. And when they say, oh, you can't do that, you can't lead with the soul of sales, that just doesn't make sense. People won't want to hear that. And I will prove you wrong, because I started the book with a letter to my father called Dear Dad. No, I don't think many sales books are starting with a vulnerable, it is a very vulnerable step, and I am partially terrified for people to read it, but I know from the feedback that I've gotten so far that I'm making grown men cry, and I that must mean something. So
We connect best through vulnerability. You cannot connect to soul unless you're open. There's just no way possible for that to happen. There has to be an opening. Yeah, I mean, Leonard Cohen, it's in the cracks that the light appears. That whole metaphor. I'm struck by your journey again. And it's proof of concept for me. My last TED talk was nature is the ultimate business guru. And if you aren't paying attention to nature, you're not going to thrive, because nature doesn't focus on survival. It focuses on thriving. And everything in nature is a center of distribution, not a center of accumulation. And that whole flow through is just magical. It truly is. Where can people find out more about what you're up to, about your company? Where can we get a copy of the revised and updated 2022 version of the Ultimate Sales Machine?
Absolutely, yes. So right now, the only place that the new edition is available is at ultimatesalesmachine.com. So people can get their copy there, and there's lots of wonderful bonuses we add so that you don't go to the Amazon, instead come over to us.
Yeah.
So ultimatesalesmachine.com. We also provide a complimentary training that if you answer 5 questions about what's going on in your business, we'll be able to give you the biggest reasons what's holding you back from doubling your sales this year. And it'll just, depending on how you answer, it gives you your training that is associated with where you are at. Because we have a lot of different companies from a lot of different spaces. We've worked with 85 of the Fortune 500, but we've also worked with 250,000 businesses, and that's from startup all the way to that. So yeah, we do that. You can find that at howtodoublesales.com.
Okay, I'll be sure both of those sites are in the show notes, so people won't have to go searching for it. Okay.
Wonderful.
So folks, you've been listening to Amanda Holmes, CEO and the standard bearer for the Chet Holmes Company. And Amanda, I cannot tell you how much of a treat this conversation has been. It's everything I would have imagined it would have been and more. So I want to thank you for your vulnerability, for your candor, and just mostly just for how you show up. It's absolutely refreshing. Thank you.
Thank you. It's such a joy. I don't normally get to do interviews like this, so it's a gem for me. Thank you, Blaine.
Great. Folks, you've been listening to The Solar Business of Blaine Bartlett. Tune in the next episode. I'm not sure who we're going to have, but I'm sure it's going to be a treat. Okay. And you can find out more about what I'm up to at blainebartlett.com. And don't hesitate to nose around. There's a lot of good stuff there. Okay. We'll see you on the next episode. As you go out into your day, set yourself up to be that center of distribution. Don't worry about being a center of accumulation. Life will work out a whole lot better for you. Take care.